Hey everybody, welcome back to the True Jalil YouTube channel. I am here with my dear friend, Kelly Edwards, who took me in for real. She was the first person when I started my job in Hollywood at Pearl Street Films, and we ended up at a film festival together, and she really took me under her wing and has been my guide and friend ever since then. And it's been freaking like 5.5 years, which I can't believe. So
it went by so quickly.
It's
absolutely. It felt like from the moment I met you, we felt like we belonged together. I don't know how to explain that.
100%.
Crazy.
I feel like we ended up spending the whole day together. I think we met like early in the day, and it was like we were having drinks, dinner and then drinks, and absolutely. And that, like, I'm so grateful, because I was a complete outsider. I didn't know anybody, and definitely didn't know what I was doing. Still don't, but you really, like, you took me in, and I think you still were kind of like, yes, you don't know what you're doing, but you never said it in that way. You're very kind in your guidance. But that's what I'd love for you to share with the viewers is, how did you come to be in a position of guiding people, and then eventually, which led you to write this incredible book, which I think it's beautiful because it makes it accessible now to everybody who doesn't get to be directly with Kelly Edwards. So I
think that was absolutely the goal, which is for a long time, I had thought that there should be more information disseminated than there had been. And I did not understand why we had these certain gatekeepers who were keeping the pipeline super, super narrow. Yep. And yet I knew that there was talent out there. And I was like, well, I give a lot of this information and I disseminate this information to 8 people or 10 people at a time. It's like a really small group of people, either at wherever I'm doing it. It's usually in the programs, but it felt like it needed to get a little bit more of a broader reach, because we need more people immediately. And I feel like sometimes the trickle in, and also there's this sort of, I think, misconception that people think that the doors are closed when the doors are really open. They just don't know that the doors are open because we aren't telling people that the doors are open. We do a really good job of not saying that part, and then we also give a lot of people the idea that it's really hard. Now it can be hard. I'm not going to discount that. It doesn't always happen on your timeline. That's absolutely for sure. Mm-hmm. But there's also this fear of sometimes people trying to break in when they should break in. And they don't really realize that, there are so many avenues to get in, and there's so many different stories, and there's a lot of different programs and a lot of different ways to crack this nut. But fear keeps them from it. So if I can just take away or chip away at the fear a little bit, then maybe we'll have a little bit, more folks flooding the gates.
Definitely. And I mean, what I love about the book, and again, I have this, very fortunate relationship with you. So I know your personality, I know how you are, and you are tough love in the best of ways, because you have high
people who said that. What?
But let me explain. Tough in the sense of you have high standards in the most important of ways, right? So just like what your book does, because it's so thorough about how the system works and how you get into it, you don't pick it up and go, oh, I'll do this tomorrow, which I think some kind of inspirational books tend to do. And then it turns out you can't do it that way. But it's also incredibly encouraging all along the way. But it's not you can do this tomorrow, which I think I tend to tell people that. And it's just not true. Yours is like, you can do this, but here are all the things that you need to do along the way. And that, it just really, it prepares people. And as I've said to you, I needed this book as an executive coming in that didn't know what I was doing. And I know a lot of executives that say they know what they're doing that also need this book. So will you tell everybody what your original OG, when you were young, impetus towards storytelling was?
Yeah, well, I think like most people who want to get into this business, we start really early. We know pretty, I know I was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 and I think at the time I was doing a lot of art, and I started writing probably around 9 or 10. Wow. And I would create my own magazines, and I would rip out pictures of other magazines and make my own magazines and write my own copy. And I'd write a lot of short stories. So I think I was doing that from a really early age. And I remember in college, I was writing a lot of plays, and there were short plays. They were only 3 or 4 pages, but I was, that's what I was doing in my spare time. I was also in college for theater. So I think, it was sort of a natural thing. And I had done theater in junior high and high school. So it wasn't a new concept for me. I just didn't want to be an actor. I knew that. And I wanted to be behind the scenes. I always felt like I was not the, I was not that person. I wanted to be hidden behind the veil, the cloak.
And here she is. The world wants to know her now. I love it.
I know, right? Yeah. It's like the irony, right?
Yes.
But I really wanted to somehow get some sort of stories out there. And I was a big film and television buff, and I've probably seen every movie, black and white movie known to man. And I just was consuming voraciously. And then, I got out of college. I got a couple little tiny temp jobs, and then wound up working for a manager, and then sort of wound my way back and forth between assistant jobs on the film side and then on the TV side. And literally every single one was, a connection begat a new job. And I just followed the cookie crumbs until I ended up looking pretty much for, well, who makes the decisions? I wanted to be the person who made the decisions. Yeah. And when I finally got into development at Fox, and then ran a department in comedy development at UPN, I started to look at, well, who makes those decisions? And I knew I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be the person at the top of the heap. And here's why: because when you get to the top of the heap, you stop making the decisions that mattered to me, which was the creative decisions. Yes. And you start making big decisions about affiliates and about, sales and marketing and all this other stuff. And it becomes less creative. I did not want to be that person. And I think that there are plenty of people out there who probably go, yeah, but I want to be the top dog. I want to be Richard Branson. I want to be, Jeff Bezos. I want to do that. And it never held any interest for me. What held interest for me, and what I think feeds my soul, is the written word. And so I desperately wanted to be in the thick of it. And so I read scripts constantly. I'm still always reading scripts. Somebody asked me yesterday, well, what are you reading? And I pulled up, I have this whole bucket on my desktop of scripts that I read voraciously. And I read them because I want to see, well, how did they make that happen? How did they make me feel that way? And can I do that too? And what pitfalls do I have in my own writing that I compete, what do I lean on? What are my, the tropes that I sort of use, and how do I break out of that? So I'm constantly.
You got to mention at least 2 that you're reading right now, or that you read and did that for you.
Okay. Here, I'll pull it up right now.
Nice.
And I actually just reread the Leftover script, which I love. And I love it also because it breaks a lot of the rules. And I love things that they obviously follow some of the rules. I also love Lost, so I'm a little bit of a Damon file. But let me see the scripts thing.
While you're saying that, I mean, because I think about this a lot, and I've talked about this some on the channel. When you're creating your own work, and learning to be a writer, there are there's format that you need to know, right? There's even like decent storytelling. So I think I talk a lot about the hero with 1,000 faces, and how there's one story, right? But then we just plug in different locations and different characters, but there is this kind of mythologically, there's this one story. And so there is kind of a format, but I always thought like the more you have that format down, actually the freer you are. But would you say maybe you don't need that format, especially now?
No. You need to know. You need to know you need all of the building blocks so that when you break the form, and I don't mean he's breaking the form. He's breaking, he does underlines and italicizes certain things, and those are sort of film school no-nos. It's not like he's breaking the complete form. And by the way, the format for a film is different from a television show. So, those books about, hitting those 5 key moments, making sure that you have, a setback and the climax and all that, that's a completely different structure. But, and I think, anybody who wants to sort of play with inside of those things, how that happens, I'm just interested in if it works. It doesn't always work. Right. But sometimes it works.
And how do you know if it works when it's yours? Like, how do you find that out? And by the way, we should mention, so Kelly is now staffed on a show and transitioned from being someone who supported filmmakers through the HBOAccess program and Color Entertainment. So through programs to support people, but she also always, as she said, since 7, 8, 9, knew she wanted to be a writer, and now is a full-time writer, not just of a show, which is Our Kind of People, which was trending last night, 2 nights ago, but also an author who now takes what you did individually with folks, making that accessible. So how do you know that it's going to land with other people the same way it lands with you?
I think part of that's just gut. When you read it and and it sort of sings back to you and that you're kind of in the pocket. I think that if you think it's good, it's probably pretty good. And I think if I put it away and then I come back to it, and I do this all the time. So I'll put something away and then I'll revisit it maybe a couple months later and I'll go, oh, this is good. I wonder who wrote this. And then I go, oh, I wrote it. Nice. And that's when I really know. I did that just the other day with the script I wrote for Sundance, or I wrote and then got into Sundance with, and I reread it and I laughed at my own jokes. And I thought, oh, well then I think it's okay. So I think part of it is that it's a gut check, right? And then there's also, you can check your work by, looking at the building blocks of just, making a pilot go. Does every scene, is there a turn? Is it giving you information and also character dynamics at the same time, or is it just exposition? You can check your work, but for the most part, I feel like I just know based on, what's in my gut, and if I'm entertained by it or if I'm moved by it. And then there are times when you look back on it and you go, oh, this could use a rewrite, which is also, that's a really important thing to know.
That's when I go on my cannabis journey and I ask myself, well, was I on the cannabis journey when I thought this was funny, and now that I'm not, it ain't funny anymore?
Exactly. That's a good one. Right. Okay, so here's some of the scripts that I have currently. Now, again, these are not any of the comedies. These are just some of the dramas that I pulled in recently, because I reread things like Salt and Source Code, which are 2 of my favorite movies. I'm a big Taken fan. I love anything Jason Bourne. So I've read all of those.
Yes.
So and I don't know why I'm so drawn to the action, but I love the fact that it's character and there's other stuff going on. But Quiet Place is in here. The Arrow pilot is in here. There was a series a few years ago called Awake. And I loved that so much because it was really intricate. You had to very succinctly and well define the 2 different time periods that he was in. And one, his wife was alive, and in one, his child was alive after a car crash. And I was fascinated by, well, how did he make sure how did whoever wrote, I don't even remember who wrote it, how did they delineate those 2 things? Because it's so tricky. And I had loved Daybreak too, the Tate show too. So I like those tricky things. Billions,
while which I thought going through this list also, I'll just tell everyone in her book, and yes, you need to get it. Truly, you need to get it. There are lots of lists of the kinds of scripts that you can look at, and also Kelly, tell everybody how you get access to these scripts, just so that they can.
I think, well, in terms of the scripts, these are all online. So if you just Google it, make sure that you're not going through a dicey portal, but they're pretty easy. I go to dailyscripts.com. Okay. And I think there's like one that's like a weekly scripts, whatever, but I've been going through those forever, and they've got a ton of things from way back when. You can also, I started to look up some stuff from like the 40s to see, well, what was the format like? It was very different.
Really?
So you can pretty much pull almost anything off the web these days.
Okay. Right.
And then in terms of the list in the book, it's really a list of, here are the things that we reference often in meetings as executives. And so if you are either getting notes from us or you're in a room and we're having a conversation, we will reference one of these things. You just need to know what it is. If you're not a student of entertainment in the way that we are, then you're going to miss a lot of stuff, right? Okay, so the other things are on here. It's not a very long list. Heat, John Wick, and Tenet. So those are my dramas that I'm currently getting through. I read parts of almost everyone, or I'm reading them for the second time. I thought A Quiet Place was beautifully done. Oh, so, and that's not any of the comedies. I don't even know where my comedy list is, but I'm constantly reading material just to see.
And then literally kind of like looking at every period, every space, every comma to break down what meaning that holds, right?
Yeah, I think too, it's like how do they turn a phrase? How does somebody walk into a room? And it's even sometimes dialogue, but for me, it's a lot of the action. I'm just really interested in how someone creates that space and that mood and the tone. I do like to read some horror stuff because I like to figure out, well, how did they create that? How did they make my skin crawl? How did the hair go up the back of my neck? So I'm just interested about, how other people do it. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be people who have made billion-dollar movies. It can be somebody who, I've worked with in a program whose work I think is interesting and different from mine. So it could be anybody. You can learn from anybody.